Start in a minute. It's almost 4:29, so we'll start. Catherine, we can start, I think.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, everyone. It is an honor to welcome you all to this webinar hosted by the Maritime Research Center on UDA-enabled river governance for regional sustainability, security, cooperation in the Brahmaputra Basin. So we are delighted to have you with us. It gives us immense pleasure to have such a distinguished panel with us today. A few quick housekeeping notes. Please stay muted unless you are the speaker. You can share the questions in the chat throughout the session. We'll take them up during the question and answer session. For today, I'll just dictate the program. So we planned a 2-hour session. The inaugural will be given by Dr. Arnab Das. It'll be about 10 minutes. Then we'll have the keynote presentation by Ms. Tejaswini Kaksikar for about 25 minutes, and followed by expert interventions of 15 minutes each by Ambassador Tariq Karim, Dr. Anamika Barua, Dr. Imadul Islam, and Dr. Asif Biswas. And then this will be followed by a short Q&A, and then the concluding remarks by Ambassador Jaideep Majumdar. Now I would like to introduce our keynote speaker. Tejaswini Katkikar is in her final year of anthropology degree at University College London, and she currently serves as a research fellow at MRC. Her work explores hydropolitics, governance, environmental security, and strategic dynamics in the Brahmaputra Basin. She tries to bring together the interdisciplinary lens to the UDA in the Brahmaputra Basin. She combines anthropology with hydrology and policy to better understand the river systems. She's also developing e-learning modules and policy monograph in this area. We are delighted to have you here, Tejaswini. Over to you.
I'll just do a small opening first. I think you missed that. Okay.
Yes,
but Tejaswini, I'll give you half to me. So I'll quickly talk about the underwater domain awareness. As Catherine mentioned, we are building this up. Underwater has multiple dimensions, and apart from Tejaswini, in our center, we have multiple research fellows looking at various dimensions. Right from sediment management, fouling to fisheries and aquaculture, and various other digital analysis. So, and Tejaswini is trying to put together the whole policy aspect and how geopolitics and various aspects need to be put together. So I'll just quickly make a small presentation to share our thoughts on the UDA framework. Although I'll not cover the main topic on Brahmaputra, which will be covered by Tejaswini. So just to give you a perspective why UDA is important, I would like to make 3 major points. One is the importance of the underwater domain and why we need to look at aspects from the underwater side also. The second is the tropical characteristics, the unique tropical characteristics. I mean, we are in the tropical region, and we need to kind of take care the rich biodiversity and various tropical characteristics. I'll not go into the details of it. And if we want to really do good governance, understanding the local conditions are extremely important. And from the underwater perspective, I would also like to say that more than the surface, so much more is below the water. I don't want to put a number here, but looking at it from the underwater domain is extremely important. And how to also look at traditional knowledge where science and technology can kind of enable the limitations of the traditional knowledge. And I would like to typically highlight three aspects. Sediment management, all the panelists are aware, but even for people who are not aware, the Brahmaputra, this is a very big issue. I mean, it loses almost 4,000 meters after it enters India. And the siltation or the sediment transport pattern is very, very unique. And unless we understand that and do some real study, it will be impossible to really manage the river in multiple ways, whether it is for transportation or various resource management, or even managing floods and erosion. The second aspect is the underwater radiated noise. Now there is a serious talk on, and not just talk, there is so much activities going on around the inland water transport. And the freshwater dolphin, I mean the hihu as we call it in the local language, is a very unique species. And as we all know, it is blind and it uses acoustic vision. So the radiated noise from the marine platforms, or basically these ships that will be put for inland water transport, will have a very serious impact. So how do we I mean, I'm not here to say that we should stop development, but being aware and how we can navigate these aspects or these concerns of sustainability is also very important. And how do we even kind of plug it into our discussion on environment impact assessment? The third is biofouling. I mean, there'll be so much of infrastructure that will be coming up, and the tropical region have very serious issue with regards to fouling. So we need to be very, very mindful. The intensity of fouling and the rate of fouling are two very important aspects. I mean, we seem to be far more dependent on knowledge from the developed world, but I think the developed world will not be able to kind of address the unique issues of our region, particularly the tropical aspect. So we need to. So we have a research fellow on this subject, and the kind of inputs that we are witnessing are very, very scary also at some times. I mean, we not just as a country, but as a region, I think maritime development has become a very, very serious policy direction. So we need to be mindful of these aspects. That's what I would like to submit here. And also the fragmentation that we see. Multiple stakeholders are in silos, if I may use the word. So how all of them can come together, and because as a developing part of the world, resource will always be an issue. But we still see significant fragmentation among stakeholders. So how they can all come together, build capacity, and then use it in a more synergized and more optimal manner. Sediment management is one big issue where there are multiple stakeholders who can collaborate. Second is underwater noise. Again, security uses stealth as a terminology. Habitat degradation is what our environmentalists use. And finally, the ship designers and ship builders will have to deliver these platforms. So we need to all work together on this. River dolphin, as I said, is very, very unique. It uses, we have done some studies. I was part of a study with Tokyo University and WWF, and we had some very unique findings of that study. So more activities will create massive degradation. So acoustic habitat degradation is another area which requires very serious study. Then, of course, the marine spatial planning or the digital transformation, we need to invest significantly, and this will be a significant governance tool which will give us very good visualization and will really help the policy intervention. This is the UDA framework that we have built. If you look at the four stakeholders, strategic security, blue economies, sustainability, climate change, and digital transformation, all of them need to come together and pool in resources and synergize effort so that we can deliver. And if you look at the vertical construct, I mean, a lot of sensing. So we have very little information what is below the surface. So a lot of effort is required, analysis, and then policy. And each of the smaller cubes could be, I mean, even we have academia that can get involved, and many of our students or young professionals can take up different aspects towards real world problem solving. So, I mean, the UDA framework, as you saw in the schematic before, provides policy intervention, technology intervention, and capacity and capability building. And what we represent in MRC, you can see liberal arts and science and technology working together to provide or to populate this UDA framework. And as Catherine also mentioned, she's working on certain e-learning modules also, so that it can be kind of provided to a large section of our young population, and not limited to India, but for the entire region. And for the digital transformation, I want to especially stress on this. The high end, I mean, we need three types of people. I mean, high end data analysts who will basically do the entire tech part of it, hardware, software, all aspects, computational infrastructure. But once that data comes in, we need domain specialists. So, I mean, domain knowledge will be very important, which will cover multidisciplinary people. And the third is the field deployment specialist. Now, we will need a section of people to go to the waterfront and provide us data, or either collecting sample or so. But this can be the local riverine community or the coastal community if it is deployed in the coastal waters. I mean, typically what we see in the name of development, the local indigenous population is kind of marginalized, or they are not mainstream. So this can be a good way where we can kind of bring them also in. And whatever we do, the strategic perspective should include people, economy, nature. So we are doing a lot of gap analysis and I mean, we call it a white paper now, which brings in the policy and technology intervention. But the gap analysis basically covers what kind of impact the communities will have, livelihood impact, then economy, and also nature. So we are creating a series of documents on that as well. So I think the way forward would be outreach, engage, sustain. I'll not spend too much time here. This webinar is also one of the effort to reach out to a larger section of experts and also kind of present what this UDA framework is all about. So, and this is, I mean, for in terms of implementation, we are looking at this 100 River Warriors initiative, where we can kind of get a local participation and a cross section of people to participate in this very important aspect. So I think I'll stop here and hand it over to Tejaswini.
So thank you, Mom, for the introduction, and thank you, sir, for conveying this discussion. And thank you, of course, for the opportunity to speak today. I'm Tejaswini Karthikar, and I'm a research fellow at the Maritime Research Centre and a BSc Anthropology student at University College London. And today I want to begin by clarifying my intent with this presentation, particularly given the expertise in this room, that this is not an attempt to introduce a new conceptual vocabulary for the sake of novelty, nor is it a critique of existing hydrological or policy work on the Brahmaputra. On the contrary, I found that the river is one of the most extensively studied systems in South Asia and has a rich literature on things like flood and channel migration and infrastructure development. What I hope to do instead is isolate a persistent structural gap that appears repeatedly across scientific, policy, and diplomatic domains. That being that the most influential processes shaping risk and instability in the Brahmaputra basin occur below the waterline, while governance systems remain primarily oriented towards surface domain indicators. This observation has emerged consistently across my work at the Maritime Research Centre, and my argument today is that adapting the underwater domain awareness framework to this river system is not a conceptual leap, but a necessary correction to a long-standing imbalance between what we model, what we observe, and what we govern. So the Brahmaputra is governed as a surface river, but it is shaped below the surface. This is not meant rhetorically, but causally. Across the basin, governance frameworks prioritize variables like flood stages and discharge peaks and visibly damaged infrastructure. These are all institutionally legible, legally actionable, and politically salient. They are also the variables maybe most easily communicated to disaster authorities and to the public. And so, in that sense, surface indicators are not irrational choices, but understandable ones. But many of the outcomes that ultimately matter most, things like embankment collapse or riverbank erosion, navigation disruption, or fishery decline, are all driven by sediment routing, riverbed adjustment, and scour, all of which evolve beneath the flow. To draw on a study from Assam, post-event investigations of embankment failures frequently show that the immediate trigger is not overtopping, but progressive toe scour, and that scour develops incrementally over multiple monsoon cycles well before any visible distress appears at the surface. By the time the issue is detected through conventional monitoring, the causal process has already played out. This sort of distinction between surface signals and subsurface causality is not unique to the Brahmaputra, but the consequences are unusually severe in this basin. In rivers with maybe lower sediment loads or more stable channels, surface indicators are often adequate proxies for risk, where stage discharge relationships hold reasonably well and channels adjust slowly and infrastructure lifetimes are longer. The Brahmaputra, however, behaves differently. It is a system where bed mobility and not discharge alone govern stability, and channel capacity can change within seasons, and sediment pulses move faster than our institutions. When our governance frameworks rely solely on surface indicators in a system like this, they are not just incomplete, but structurally misaligned to how the river actually behaves. And this is why many interventions appear to fail suddenly, when in reality they've been failing slowly and out of sight. This sort of governance process gap has always existed, but four contemporary pressures have made it all the more consequential. The first, of course, being accelerated infrastructure development in the basin, with upstream hydropower projects in the Tibetan Plateau, expanding navigation corridors under India's National Waterway 2, and new river terminals and embankments downstream have all significantly increased the number of fixed assets exposed to morphological instability. Each structure not only introduces risk at its own site, but also perturbs sediment and flow conditions upstream and downstream, often in ways that we only ever partially anticipate. The second, of course, is transboundary asymmetry. The Brahmaputra, as we know, is shared by China, India, and Bangladesh, but access to data, particularly relating to things like sediment retention or reservoir operation or riverbed response, remains uneven even today. This asymmetry amplifies uncertainty, even in the absence of malicious intent, so to speak. The third, of course, is climate volatility, with recent basin scale studies documenting increasing variability in monsoon intensity and sequencing, alongside glacial and cryospheric changes in the upper basin. What I think is important here is not just more floods, but also less predictable coupling between discharge, sediment mobilization, and channel response. The fourth, and this is of course particularly important in this basin, that sediment regimes in the Brahmaputra are highly mobile and poorly monitored. Take, for example, reach-scale geomorphological studies around Majuli Island, for example, have documented rapid braid bar migration, delayed planform response to discharge peaks. And all of these processes are extensively modeled in the literature, but rarely ever observed in real time. And as a result, our governance decisions are often made using representations of the river that are technically quite sophisticated, but temporally out of date. This sort of brings us to then a structural mismatch at the heart of river governance. On one side are the domains that governance manages relatively well: flood stages and extents, embankments, navigation channels, dams, and barrages. These are all visible, measurable, and institutionally tractable. But on the other side are then the processes that are driving risk: sediment regimes, rapid channel adjustments, scour and deposition, and underwater habitats. Take, for example, in the middle reaches of the basin around Assam, where embankments have been repeatedly raised and strengthened and extended over the last 2 decades. But at the same time, erosion rates along certain reaches have accelerated rather than declined. The studies show that this is not because embankments are universally ineffective, but because their interaction with sediment dynamics is poorly observed. In several cases, embankments constrained lateral channel movement and increased flow concentration and accelerated bed scour. These changes were not visible in flood stage data, but they fundamentally altered near bank hydraulics. This creates then sort of a problem. If the investments intended to reduce risk appear to increase it, not because the intervention is irrational, but then because the underlying process is not being monitored correctly. It is a fundamental structural limitation of surface-oriented governance, which is why I then described the Brahmaputra River as an invisible river. Not because it's unknown, but because some of its most influential components remain weakly observed. The river is sediment dominated. Its beds migrate continuously. Its underwater ecological structure, including things like deep pools and spawning grounds, play a central role in fisheries and biodiversity. Yet these components are observed intermittently, modeled extensively, and rarely ever monitored in real time. This creates a paradox of sorts. We have high confidence in long-term averages, but low confidence in the near-term system state. Fisheries here provide a useful illustration where declines in fish stocks are often attributed primarily to overfishing or pollution. However, both ecological studies and community narratives have indicated that habitat loss due to sediment infilling of deep pools is also a major driver. Without this subsurface visibility, however, our management response focuses on regulating catches solely rather than also restoring habitat structure. This invisibility of the underwater domain thus sort of shapes both diagnosis and policy choice, and our blindness, for the lack of a better word, has predictable consequences for governance. Surface-focused governance systems tend to share three similar characteristics. First, that they detect failure after subsurface change has already occurred. Second, that they respond to damage rather than precursors. And the third being that they reinforce reactive intervention cycles. This pattern is visible not only in flood management, but also in navigation planning and infrastructure maintenance, where dredging and repair are often triggered by crisis rather than trend. I think it's very important to stress that this reactive pattern is not just a matter of poor planning. River governance institutions are typically designed around event-based triggers, a flood threshold or a breach or a declared disaster, and budgets and legal authority and political attention are all activated by visible events. Subsurface change, however, does not trigger these mechanisms. There's no institutional equivalent of an early warning system for progressive scour or sedimentary organization. And so, as a result, even when the technical expertise exists, it struggles to translate into action because the governance system is not designed to respond to slow, invisible change. The underlying issue here is then temporal, where subsurface processes are evolving continuously, but governance is reacting episodically. This sort of temporal mismatch then explains why flood management, for example, remains largely post hoc despite decades of investment. And in transboundary rivers, particularly like the Brahmaputra, this mismatch also becomes a diplomatic problem. Transboundary rivers fail where change is visible, but not entirely verifiable. Downstream impacts like floods or erosion or altered sediment loads are experienced directly, while upstream processes remain opaque. Critically, like sediment dynamics and channel morphology and infrastructure condition all remain largely unshared across borders today. And what this means in practice is that uncertainty itself becomes politicized, that in that vacuum, worst case assumptions fill the gap, and concerns about upstream dams become securitized not only because of scale, but also because independent verification is weak. This is then less a failure of diplomacy rather than a failure of evidence. And this is where the underwater domain awareness framework becomes analytically useful. The UDA's core principle, which is the integration of multiple observational layers to understand the system state, is entirely consistent with what may be required in the Brahmaputra today. Applied to river systems, the UDA involves systematically incorporating subsurface variables like bathymetry and sediment flux and scour patterns and acoustic ecological indicators into existing monitoring and decision frameworks. It's important to note that this is not about importing surveillance logic, but about addressing a documented observational imbalance. We already model sediment and morphology extensively. The UDA strengthens the empirical basis of those models and connects them more directly to governance. Then the implications of this sort of shift are practical. The first, of course, being that things like early detection of scour at foundations allows for targeted reinforcement before failure, particularly for things like bridges and embankments in braided reaches. The second being that dynamic bathymetry inputs improve flood forecasting by updating assumptions about channel capacity and conveyance. The third being that sediment-informed infrastructure planning reduces things like maladaptive dredging and poorly sited terminals. And the fourth being that the direct observability of submerged habitats supports fishery management and livelihoods by linking ecological outcomes to physical processes. But beyond risk management, the UDA also has strategic value. By producing a sort of shared, verifiable evidence base, the UDA functions also as a trust infrastructure. It doesn't require complete total political consensus, but agreement on measurement. This is particularly relevant to the Brahmaputra Basin, where basin-wide treaties still remain politically sensitive. Shared observations can stabilize dialogue even in periods of diplomatic strain. In this sense, the UDA supports hydroverification and not hydrohegemony. Many transboundary water disputes persist not because states disagree on principles, but because many disagree on the system state, on questions like what is the sediment load, where is the channel adjusting, what is changing and what is not. And in the absence of shared observation, political narratives tend to harden, and technical uncertainty is read as strategic ambiguity. What the UDA then offers here is not agreement, but bounded disagreement, where states can disagree on interpretation while still operating from a shared evidentiary baseline, which lowers escalation risk without requiring total political convergence. Technology, however, is not the only thing that the UDA allows for. It allows for integrating historical flood memory and community river intelligence along with scientific monitoring. Indigenous communities have long tracked subsurface change indirectly. For example, among the missing tribe, flood adapted housing, cropping cycles, and fishing practices have all encoded sediment and flow knowledge accumulated over generations. Taken together with scientific monitoring, this improves both interpretation, legitimacy, and applicability. It is important, however, to note that this is not an alternative epistemology, but rather a complementary one. And that taken together, it allows our database to be richer and, well, more informed. The strategic implications then for the UDA imply three major governance shifts. The first is a shift from surface control to subsurface awareness. This does not mean abandoning flood stage management or visible infrastructure, but it means recognizing that in a sediment-dominated river like the Brahmaputra, surface indicators are often lagging signals. Subsurface awareness changes when interventions become possible. Instead of responding after erosion or scour or habitat loss becomes visible, governance can then respond to precursors and to trends rather than events. Importantly, it's not a call for perfect knowledge, but for a better alignment between dominant processes and dominant indicators. The second shift is from crisis response to anticipatory governance. Much of river governance today, like I discussed earlier, is structurally reactive, where budgets and legal authority and attention are all triggered by declared floods or breaches or disasters. What subsurface observability offers here is not prediction in the deterministic sense, but anticipation and the ability to recognize when risk is accumulating, even if no crisis has occurred yet. This is a subtle but important distinction that anticipatory governance does not eliminate uncertainty entirely, but it manages it earlier and allows us and governance frameworks to manage it earlier. The third shift is from hydrohegemony to hydroverification. In transboundary contexts, power asymmetries are real and persistent. What often escalates tension, however, is not power itself, but unverifiable change. That hydroverification doesn't resolve political disagreement, but it changes the informational environment in which disagreement occurs. That shared comparable observation allows for states to contest interpretations without contesting facts. At this point, I think it's also important to note that the application of the UDA doesn't come without its concerns. One concern, of course, is feasibility and whether continuous and systematic subsurface monitoring is realistic in a river as dynamic as the Brahmaputra. The answer I would say to that is that this framework doesn't depend on an entire continuous basin-wide coverage, but on strategic observation at selected nodes, especially in this river, that are calibrated to governance needs rather than total scientific completeness. Another concern is, of course, institutional overload and whether already stretched river agencies can absorb additional data streams. And while that risk is very real, it's important that the UDA should not be understood as adding information indiscriminately, but as reprioritizing which information is crucial for decision making. A third concern is, of course, securitization, and that framing subsurface observation as domain awareness could militarize river governance. And in that sense, this risk is only there if the framework is implemented without clear ownership, clear civilian ownership, and transparency. And in the way that I've described it here today, the UDA is an explicitly a verification-oriented approach and not surveillance architecture. Finally, it's important to say what this framework does not do. It does not eliminate floods, and it does not resolve transboundary disputes, and it does not replace political negotiation. What it does allow us to do is narrow the gap between how the river behaves and how it is governed. And in a system that is as dynamic and politically sensitive as the Brahmaputra, that narrowing alone is consequential. The question then no longer remains technical. We do possess the tools to observe sediment and map bathymetry and integrate data streams. The question is whether governance systems are willing to incorporate processes that have always existed but remained largely unseen. And in the Brahmaputra basin, making the underwater domain visible is not just an academic exercise, but a precondition for resilience, cooperation, and long-term stability. Thank you.
Thank you, Tejaswini. I would now like to open the floor for the panel members to share their interventions. Starting off with Ambassador Tariq Karim. Ambassador is a distinguished Bangladeshi diplomat who has served as an ambassador to the US, High Commissioner to India and South Africa, and ambassador to Iran. As additional foreign secretary, he played a key role in negotiating the Ganges Water Treaty and advancing Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, and Nepal regional cooperation. He is currently the director of the Center for Bay of Bengal Studies in Dhaka. Sir, well, we are very happy to have you here and excited to hear your interventions.
Thank you very much. And thank you for moving me up the speaker's slot, because in about 6 p.m. your time, I will be moving away from a stationary spot into a moving vehicle where I will lose Wi-Fi, but be hostage to internet connectivity on the mobile. So please bear with me if I suddenly disappear out of sight, say around 6 p.m. or 6:15 p.m. your time. Uh, I've listened to all the and the point made by both Commodore Arnab Das and Kaktikar are very valid. Perhaps it's a novel way of shifting attention away from contentious issues to something which need not be contentious. But then, as Kaktikar pointed out, will governments be able to make the quantum jump from conventional thinking to even translating their, their way of thinking to the underwater domain? They keep getting bogged down in the conventional way of approaching. Most governments, as has been rightly pointed out, tend to be reactive in the way they function. They react to situations and emergencies, but they don't have the time or the energy or even the gumption to do anticipatory thinking, which actually has to be the basis of addressing any environmental or ecological issue. And this is where it's a fundamental, I would say, a deficiency in government thinkings across most of our region, certainly, but not just in our region, it is elsewhere. Now, unfortunately, in my practice and career, I have increasingly and with some despair noticed how diplomacy becomes, or foreign policy becomes a function of domestic political policies and politics, and how they spill across borders, and even where sanity and wisdom dictate that we should be cooperating, the turbulence within intrudes into the space where we can possibly get together and arrive at some point. I would like to share here, I mean, for Bangladesh, Brahmaputra is a very, very important river. The size of the population on the Brahmaputra basin is over 58% of our population. Okay. Around 10 million people in Bangladesh live on shores which are formed and broken by the river in its meandering course. And on the larger Ganges, Brahmaputra, Meghna basin, it supports around 630 million, and quite a large number of them are in Bangladesh. Bangladesh is, after all, the deltaic region. From the rivers or start vanishing or behaving in erratic matters, then the delta itself faces existential problems. And that translates directly into the local politics. The local politics then tends to become extremely inward looking rather than indulge in the luxury of looking at the larger picture. I learned a very important lesson. I mean, I've been involved with river water negotiations since the early stages of my career. And I was posted twice in India between 84 and 88 when I participated in some of the annual meetings of the Joint River Commission. And then in 96, I was able to take the two countries together on the path of resolving the Ganges water dispute. That treaty, unfortunately, will end. 30 years will be over this December. Then I don't know where we will go. We have 54 shared rivers. We have a treaty only on one, which is going to expire soon. So all these are points which, and the current situations, the domestic fulminations taking place across the region have been somewhat depressing to me personally, as I see the prospects of regional cooperation sort of recede to the background or the sidelines, and we will have to ride this storm out. I learned my most important lesson management, not during the period I was in India, but after I left New Delhi, and gone to Beijing in 1989. And a month of my joining there, I was I was as acting ambassador. I was conducting my Secretary Water Resources and a delegation to talk with the Chinese water side. And as a conversation starter, you engage in banalities before you start the serious discussion with notes and files. I asked the vice minister sitting opposite me, Excellency, how did you tame your river of sorrows? And he looked at me inscrutably and answered with a monosyllabic term, manpower. Our side was puzzled. My secretary said, can you ask him to explain what he means? You're asking about how you tame the river, but he's saying manpower. And the response was a moment of epiphany for me. He said, look, for hundreds, perhaps thousands of years, we have been wasting time, energy, and resources on trying to tame a river, which is essentially not tameable. We realize that a river is a force of nature, and every river has a personality of its own. And the only way you can hope to train it is to train the river from the headwaters to the mouth simultaneously. Because otherwise, we were building structures here and there, and the river would bypass it or just smash through it. And so we did exactly, when we realized that, we did exactly that. We have manpower, we poured our manpower along both sides of the river, and we trained it at the same time from the headwaters to the mouth. And that was when a light bulb started frantically, going on and off inside my brain. I said, okay, they could do this. The Chinese tamed this vast river because the entire configuration and course of the river is within China. We have divided our rivers along Westphalian borders. And in doing so, we claim sovereignty over the space of the river that is with us. But the river has no sovereignty. It doesn't follow Westphalian rules. We have to follow the river's rules. And that is where we have been stuck, and we continue to be stuck. When I was talking with friends across the table in the Indian side, I mentioned that, look, I wonder whether we'll be able to get to the point where we collaborate. Because in your own constitution, you have subdivided the river into subnationalities. And you have not been able to solve problems between the southern states and several rivers. So how do you expect to change that mindset when across your borders into India or from across the borders from India to somewhere else? And this is a challenge which we are still trying to square the circle. So far, we have not gone anywhere near. I think the only way towards that is to try. So I became an ardent champion and a supporter of encouraging regional cooperation. At least if we cooperate in some sectors, we will get to the most challenging part in due course, because it will change the mindset with which we approach. And Anamika, who's a co-panelist here, a dear friend and a comrade in the trenches, we have been together trying to encourage cooperative discussion for collaboration on the Brahmaputra between Bangladesh, India, and China, and also including Bhutan. And this is something which we have been doing, at least I had been doing since 2008. And by 2018, for the first time, when we were all together in Shanghai, I thought I detected that we had come to a point where all three sides were very close to the same position. And then, unfortunately, domestic politics in one or two or more intervened, and there has been no discussion or continuation of the dialogue since then. And just forgive me, I'm sitting outside, so give me a minute for the Azan to finish because I'm competing with a microphone very nearby.
Yes, sir.
Okay, sorry for that break. Uh, so I think in a sense, I find some logic to the proposal which is being put forward now by Comrade Das and Kaktikar in their presentations, trying to zero in on something which perhaps because it is underwater and out of sight is not a trigger to fueling mutual suspicion. In a sense, it lends to the sub. We are already exchanging data on a number of aspects of river water. Bangladesh and China started it, and soon after China and India also started it. So we have some common subsets. It's the parameters which are not, perhaps we need to enlarge that or identify additional parameters. I mean, sediment management is, of course, one of the primary things that we have to consider because of the sheer volume of sediments that this river brings down. I mean, the whole Bay of Bengal seabed has several miles layer thick of sediment at the base. You know, I mean, we don't know for a fact what sort of chemical reactions are going on between the different components of the sedimentation. We don't know is there a correlation between that sediment and the dead zone that has emerged in the Bay of Bengal, which is perilously close to our waters and West Bengal Indian waters. And of course, reports are now coming out, and I've seen some in the last few weeks about this dead zone and fish depletion and other things happening. So this is an aspect of underwater radiated noise or underwater pollution, which needs to be explored. And of course, what is driving the fish population down? Is it poaching? Is it just fish stocks dying or depleting? Is it overfishing? All these are also aspects we need to look into. Bangladesh has not been able to explore beyond 10% of its maritime domain, simply because we are not geared to that, and our fishermen are more comfortable fishing in the shallow waters. They've still not ventured out. But the reports coming out say the fish stock in the deeper edges are also dwindling. So these are areas where perhaps discussions need to be resumed, even if there's a reluctance. We need to try and push them at least at technical levels, because I think it's necessary, even when the politics is out of sync, that an epistemic community of experts be found, because experts will share the same parameters and the same training and the same outlook. Perhaps they may be able to impress upon it. And I think also I believe in perseverance and persistence. Look, I've been chasing this dream, which has been like a chimera for the last 30 years. I'm 82 now, I'm still chasing it. I'll continue doing it till I'm under the sword. But that's the only way. We need to have patience with each other, and we need to keep persevering with this. I feel that the Brahmaputra dialogue should resume, even if it's not track one. Let it do it once again from the beginning, from track 2, and take it to track 1.5. Because without this dialogue, we are not going to be able to address anything. And can you address all these problems in segments? This is the problem that I have intellectually. See, that lesson from China haunts me. Can I address this in segments? Because the river is a flowing body. What happens in one segment will affect the part of the body in the other segment. Fish will travel up, or fish will travel down, or fish will disappear. Okay. Uh, Bay of Bengal is a maritime peaceful dispute-free region. Is the perhaps one of the few, or if not the only, water body of that magnitude which is free of dispute. And yet we have not been able to come to a governance system, despite stated efforts by BIMSTEC and others for governing the Bay of Bengal. If we could do that, we could apply that elsewhere. But let's try and get at least one river right. And my fears are that we are straying into territory where even the agreement we have on the other river is going to run out, and we don't know what the future is ahead. So I'll stop my comments here, and I'll listen, and if possible, I'll chip in later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. I would now like to invite Dr. Anamika Barua. Dr. Barua is a faculty member at the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences in the IIT, Indian Institute of Technology, Guwahati, specializing in interdisciplinary research on sustainability transition in Global South. Her interest includes water governance, transboundary rivers, and climate adaptation, with a strong focus on linking policy, institutions, and socio-ecological systems. Happy to have you with us, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Catherine. And thank you so much, Arnab, for having me here. I cannot tell you how good I feel to speak in between two very eminent personalities, Ambassador who just now spoke, Tariq Karim, and Professor Vishwas. And both of them are very important personality for me, because both of them has been always very, very encouraging on whatever I am doing related to Brahmaputra. One thing that I want to share, I was so fortunate that I heard firsthand from Tariq Karim, Ambassador Tariq Karim, about how he negotiated for the Ganges Treaty. And I don't think anyone has heard that. And so that was how, I mean, it was a very nice relationship that we shared through the Brahmaputra Dialogue Project. And even Professor Vishwas and Cecilia attended our dialogue in Singapore. So it's an extreme, I mean, it's a privilege actually to be speaking here. I would also like to actually thank and congratulate Tejaswini for the excellent presentation, because I feel it is very, very difficult to bring so many things together into one presentation and still making sense, what you want to say. So I think it was very nicely done. Many of the points that you actually mentioned, we did realize those points when we were actually running the dialogue, and I'm sure Ambassador Tariq Karim would agree with me. One of the points that you mentioned is about trust deficit. As you will see, the data sharing is already happening, but the problem is we don't move beyond that. That is the biggest problem. We somehow get stuck there. So what I'm thinking is that I'm going to, look at your presentation, and I'm going to take a little bit of a critical lens so that it can help you in moving ahead as well, is that, so let me just begin by situating the Brahmaputra not just as a river, uh, it's a transboundary socio-ecological system that connects China, India, Bangladesh, and sustains, as Ambassador mentioned, millions of people through livelihoods, culture, and ecosystems. And this particular keynote that you made, it shows us very powerfully that how, river is changing through intensifying floods, sediment, volatility, and also increasingly unpredictable behavior. And how much of this transformation is actually happening below the surface. That's what is very interesting in your presentation. And so what I want to focus on is, in my intervention, is that what this means for governance and cooperation. And it's not very nice time as of now. The time is not great to talk about regional cooperation, but like we cannot, of course, give up as well. But my central point is very simple, that the Brahmaputra governance challenge is not only actually about lack of data, but about how data, power, risk, and responsibilities, are negotiated across borders. So then we need to ask, we do have several governance framework, but why these existing governance frameworks are failing? So if we look at how Brahmaputra is currently governed, we see that most framework, of course, remain surface focused, as you rightly mentioned, and also very much event driven. And that's the biggest issue. And I completely agree. Governance still responds to floods after they occur rather than, anticipating risk. And climate change has fundamentally altered the river's behavior. Floods are no longer just more frequent, they are more uncertain. Sediment loads are changing, channels are migrating, and of course, erosion is accelerating. And these changes, it's not only just producing economic damage, and I think that's something is so important for us to, bring out, is that it is also generating a lot of non-economic losses and damage, irrespective of in which part of the country you are talking about. Loss of land, loss of identity, loss of cultural landscape. There are chronic displacement. There are long-term livelihood erosion, and mostly downstream. Either it is Assam or it is Bangladesh. And yet governance mechanisms still unfortunately prioritize infrastructure, flow regulation, hydrological data, while risk, vulnerability, life loss kind of remain marginal. And this somehow, I feel, disconnect. This is one of the core governance failure in the basin. So I do see that UDA is an opportunity, but I'll also say that, but it's not like a silver bullet, This is where actually UDA or underwater domain awareness becomes definitely important. But from the governance perspective, what I feel is that this matters also because you mentioned, if there is transparency in data, it actually also brings more trust. So technical uncertainty is often used as a political justification as well for delay or inaction. So I do see that UDA has the potential to shift cooperation actually from a reactive crisis management to anticipatory governance. And also, as Ambassador mentioned, it is not so visible. It really helps. But please, we have to also remember data alone does not guarantee cooperation, because South Asia already has examples where data sharing agreements exist, yet trust remains fragile. So the real question is not just whether we generate better data, but who controls it, who interprets it, who bears the consequences of decisions based on it. And that is where I feel that we have to move from, and as was also mentioned in the keynote, from a technical coordination, like the way we have Joint River Commission, to a political economy kind of a lens as well. So if UDA is treated again, like every other intervention is, as a purely technical solution, then it will reproduce existing asymmetries. So we could end up with highly sophisticated monitoring system upstream, while downstream communities continue to experience repeated loss and damage. So it is also about so many things, about residual risk, limits to adaptation, so many other things also comes into the picture. So this is why I think Brahmaputra governance must be connected to all of these particularly moving away just from a very narrow technocratic focus to a larger economy, environment, and social focus. And all of these also matters in infrastructure planning. And I think UDA can support better decision, but governance determines again whether those decisions are equitable. Now, coming to the regional cooperation, what could change? So again, I think UDA does open a real opportunity for cooperation through joint monitoring node, shared sediment, morphology dashboard, many things. Now with AI and ML today, you can do so many things, and this can actually also help create shared knowledge, and which is so important for risk trust building. And this is something we also tried to do during our dialogue, is that it's not just about having dialogues, it is also, can countries have a common platform where knowledge can be shared, knowledge can be generated? Because when you do that, when you all know what science is talking about, your trust is also, it also enhances the trust. So it is very important that the cooperation moves beyond just bilateral technical committees towards more like a basin-wide multiscalar governance, and it does not always have to be at track one level. It can always start from people to people connect, and then you start moving up to track 1.5 and also finally to track 1. This also requires, very importantly, acknowledging asymmetries. That's so important because every country in the basin is different and at different levels of development. And so, it should be that upstream data advantage can be there on one side, but how does that data advantage or that technical sophistication can be also harnessed by another country within the basin who probably doesn't have that sophistication. So it's also important that how do we build capacities about, because this is a very new domain, how do we build capacity so that, again, building capacity, not just technical capacity, but also beyond technology, to make sure that there is more like a holistic understanding of this approach. I'm not going to speak a lot because I think it'll be better to have more conversation. So let me conclude with like 3 quick takeaways. So I think first, the Brahmaputra's risks are increasing underwater, but we have to remember the losses are deeply social. Second, there is no doubt UDA is a powerful enabler, but governance determines whether it reduces risk or it reproduces inequality. So we have to keep in mind the governance mechanism. And third, the future of Brahmaputra cooperation lies in linking technology, trust, and justice. And so rather than treating them as separate domains, let's see if we can bring technology, trust, and justice together into one domain. If done well, UDA can help refrain the river from a site of recurring crisis to a platform for cooperative, anticipatory, and also equitable river governance. So my last line is that in the Brahmaputra basin, the challenge is, that's what I feel, is no longer whether we can see the river better, but whether we are willing to govern what we see together has always, I think, a big challenge. So I'm going to end here and over to you, Catherine. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you for your insights. I would now like to invite Dr. Imadul Islam. Dr. Imadul is a senior researcher at the Ocean Policy Research Institute, Sasakawa Peace Foundation, Tokyo. He's also serving as an advisor special envoy to the chairman, Royal University, Dhaka, Bangladesh. His work focuses on climate resilience, ocean policy, and coastal sustainability in the Bay of Bengal and Indo-Pacific region. Happy to have you with us, sir.
Okay, but thank you so much. Actually, I'm very novice in this field, and it's my responsibility here just to listen. All of 3 listened in here, Professor Bishash and Anamika Boro and Ambassador Karim. So, uh, but I have some comments in that important discussions, because from my life experience, what I have faced and my community faced, because I live in the Tor area in the Brahmaputra. My father is a farmer, and I saw how this Brahmaputra actually changing this flow system and everything. So, as already mentioned, the data vulnerability of these areas, I found that it's always in our mind. Maybe the upstream countries, they will change their mind and our problem could be solved. In my beginning of life, I heard that some problem like Tista, Farakka Barrage, Tista Treaty, and Ganges Treaty, and many things. And we are very, very much hopeful on this perspective that might be the problem has been changed, because the problem is very, very crucial. Even it's a riverian country, but in our academic discussions, academic course curriculum, never and ever add this subject as a matters for teaching and learning. So from the very beginning and the very structural point, we avoid this issue very systematically. So we always thinking that river is a natural things and river will give us the many things to us only, but we haven't any local ground or any responsibility to protect it. So in this world, new world order, when before like that in 19th century and also the late of the 20th century, we found that our relations in the neighbor countries is always very, very good. But even in the last regime of Bangladesh government, it's about to make another treaty, in the Tista Treaty. It's about to success. But when what's happening, even the national government is agreed to do it, but the local government and the state government disagree in several perspectives. So my happening in there. The thing is mindset of the political and policymakers in this region. Since it's transboundary river, and the responsibility and the decision is not only the one country. Here is the two biggest country in the upstream, like China, India, and also the Bangladesh, and all of these local and regional leaders, they should understand the reality, what's going to happen in the next 20 years of this vast majority of those who are dependent on the Brahmaputra river. And not only Brahmaputra river, it's also aligned with our new politics that is happening in the regional. So, um, so my first comment again with our keynote speaker, she already tried to explain the everything. But I do like the one items that other Anamika and Ambassador Karim also mentioned, that not to act as a crisis response. We should actually try to do something anticipatory governance. So that is the important. And how you'll do it, that's the questions. In that regard, I also agree with my previous panelist, both of them, that track to diplomacy is very crucial. Since those item is very crucial uh, to our current days, but due to some other reason, other global paradigm, we are just talking about now like a tariff and many other things. So never thinking that is in my last observation of 1 years after the Trump government arrived, I never saw that any of the major political leaders, they are talking about the water and the transboundary these issues very loudly. Even nowadays, due to the global paradigm and others shifting very quickly, water and water issues is neglected and very profoundly. So as a think tank organization from the Japan base is like Ocean Policy Research Institute. We always believe that ocean is the mother of life. We also, in our South Asia context, we believe water is not only life. We call the Ganga is a mother. So, so it's our responsibility to protect this. And how can we protect in the broader paradigm? So, scientific research, including the UDA framework and many other things, and also the policy dialogue is very crucial. And also give the priorities and crystallize the wisdom. The people are expert like Mr. Bishash and Ambassador Karim, to use them to bridge between the three countries and people-to-people contact. So in the current diplomacy, not only the current diplomacy, in the diplomatic international relations is totally determined, even in this world order, is totally person-to-person contact. That is directly or indirectly we witnessed. So I think that we should utilize in the policy dialogue to lead some of think tank and philanthropic institutions and to capitalize the knowledge and their network, like Mr. Bishas and Anamika Borua and Ambassador Karim, that they are working in the long time in these transboundary river problem solutions to utilize their wisdom. As I know that Mr. Bishas is a champion on this matter, and he received another Nobel things that in the call in the water is Stockholm Water Prize, and he also, as I know that he solved the Gulf state river problem in the early 1980s. Maybe he will also mention, but we should incorporate his ideas to solve these things in our region that is a combination of the huge 3 billion population almost in here. So, uh, so our work that I'm advocating in this perspective, in this some of the ideas and some of thinking that from the ground, the community voice in the policy level. So, Mr. Arnav Das joined in our one initiative in Bangladesh very recently in the last week. We call the Northeast Indian Ocean Dialogue. So like that, we can sit together for track to diplomacy, and both of the side maybe the relation is not that much good in the neighbor countries, but in the coming new government when formed immediately after, we should start the discussion the importance of the Brahmaputra river, not only the Brahmaputra river, the other basin, that is Ganges and Tista and other Jamuna and other basin and all the transboundary rivers. How can we utilize water for peace rather than it just used for as a weapon? So that is happening. That is happening in the last of experience, and it's come from upstream countries, and they are now building a dam with the name of the different things we know. So rather than acting in that way, so to consider the humanitarian aspect and the well-being of this vast community. As the witness of a Brahmaputra river that I live, I grew up there's a river with last in my age than when I am in the village almost 20 years, and I am the witness of the suffering. Nobody taking care of this suffering in this capitalized world, and it is largely ignored. In that realm, I strongly believe that the research is a key to make sense the policymaker in this artificial intelligence age, and to use the personal contact and the wisdom that we have our senior scholar that like Professor Bishas and Ambassador Karim and the think tank, the Maritime Research Center doing, and also from the Japan, we can also lead in that realm. Um, Again, I would like to stop in here. I'm very much novice researcher in that paradigm, but finally, I would like to say the one information in here. Uh, our behavior is also important. How do we behave? And that is relevant to the very ground, to the top level, because we are not aware about our problem. You know that the plastic pollution is a very crucial thing. So out of 10 most plastic polluted rivers that contributing in the plastic pollution, 3 in the Asia, and one is the Ganges and Brahmaputra. So in that ground, uh, my recommendation is to do the advocacy with the government to promote the environmental education and to incorporate the importance of the river and river conservations and the management at the very early stage. then we can make some change. And that is the national level, and regional level is the policy dialogue, and to utilize the resources for the some common agreement to solve this issue for peace and water uses as a peace as a noble manner. So thank you so much. This is my comment, and I'm happy to hear the rest of discussions.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Finally, I'm delighted to invite Dr. Asit K. Biswas. Dr. Biswas is one of the world's leading water policy experts, a Stockholm Water Prize laureate, distinguished visiting professor at the University of Glasgow, and chief executive of the Third World Center for Water Management. He's known for emphasizing better governance and management over the idea of physical water scarcity. Happy to have you with us, sir.
Kindly unmute yourself, sir. Vishwas sir, you're muted, sir. Kindly unmute yourself, sir.
Maybe host can also unmute. Can you try doing that? No?
We can't unmute. We can mute people.
Oh, okay. But he was speaking.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Yes. Thank
Okay.
you so much.
Yes.
Thank you. No, thank you. Let me first thank you, Dr. Das, to put together such distinguished group of people to discuss one of the complex problems in the world. I'd like to share with you a few of my views, more of the macro policy level. First, I think the water profession, as one of the speakers mentioned, not many major politicians are speaking about water. Why? I'll tell you one anecdote. One of my early mentors was Mrs. Gandhi, Indira Gandhi. And whenever I used to be in Delhi, she used to invite me and we used to talk. And I remember one conversation in 1975. She looked at me like an elder sister and said, Osit, when I listen to you, I get the impression the sun and the moon and all the planets revolve around water. I have to tell you, I am the Prime Minister of India. I have absolutely no interest in water. Okay? I was horrified. I said, Indraji, how is it possible? Blah, blah. Without water, human being cannot live. We can't produce food. All those things. She said, if you want to discuss water as it is, I'll be happy to ask my secretary to make an appointment with the water minister or the chairman of the Central Water Commission. And when they know that I am interested, they will give you the red carpet and you will talk to your heart's content about water. But please, when you discuss, don't bring the water into discussion. So I said, I don't want to talk to the water minister. I want to talk to you. She said, if you want to talk to me, think as a prime minister what I'm interested in. And she said, I'm interested in India's economic development. How do I increase employment in the country? How do I improve the quality of life and the standard of living of the Indian people. So if you want to discuss water, try to frame it in a way so that water becomes an engine for regional development, employment generation, and improving standard of life, standard of living. And since then, I basically gave up. If you now talk about water efficiency, etc., I'm not that interested. I know it is important, but I want to discuss how water improves. And when you frame it that way, the politicians listen. Okay? So one of the things I've been suggesting is the water professionals need to change our mindset. The keynote lecture said reimagining Brahmaputra. I'll say reimagine water management. And the objective should be not an efficient water management or distribution, but how water can act as a catalyst for improving the lifestyle of all Indians, create employment, and improve the economic development of the country. So that is the first thing. Second item I'd like to share with you is both India and Bangladesh is now, both of them have, I'm sorry to say this, terrible water management practices, absolutely terrible, which should have been jettisoned at least a century ago. Okay? Because of poor management, a country like India already has water scarcity in most parts of the world. That is even before climate change became a major factor. Now it is even worse. And then, if we look at the economic plans in India, by 2047, under Viksit Bharat, India's GDP is supposed to increase 10 times what it is today. Okay? Where if you increase 10 times, there's going to be a lot of industrial development. India's population is increasing, food is necessary, electricity is necessary, and no electricity can be produced without water. So if we can't handle even water with a 4 trillion economy at present, how can you handle 40 trillion economy if it is possible in 21 years? It doesn't make sense. So we have to look at how we change water management completely. I like the keynote lecturers reimagining. So I'm now helping Niti Aayog to reimagine India's water management. Otherwise, there is no hope. There is no way we can produce enough electricity. There is no way we can produce food with the current poor water management practices. And the third thing I would like to say is the world is changing very rapidly. The rules of transboundary rivers are now being thrown out of the window. Only 3 weeks ago, President Trump told Mexican president that unless you release so many million cubic meters of water from the Colorado River, we will increase the tariff to 25%. Okay? This is not negotiations. And as the Canadian Prime Minister said last week in Davos, it's become the world's rule-based economy is collapsing. So we have to think about how we can manage water in a transboundary setting under new conditions, which may last I don't know how many years, but it will last for some time. So it's no point saying that we should follow the international rules of transboundary river management because the strong are not going to listen to it. They do whatever they want, and the weak will have to follow. Now, next point I'd like to make is Brahmaputra is now probably only river, only untapped river in both in China, India, and Bangladesh. It's got untapped water resources. It's the only river which has so much water available, which are not being used for a variety of reasons. So how do we make Brahmaputra river of economic benefit to the country? And when we say economic benefit, it means environmental benefit, social benefit, all types of benefits together. How do we do that? And that is what one of the main problems we were facing in transboundary water management. Emadul mentioned, and Ambassador Tarek mentioned, the Ganga Treaty is over this year, okay? Why is no one in India or Bangladesh or China or Pakistan doing any research anywhere how to design a living treaty? Okay, India was a very different country 30 years ago when the Ganga Water Treaty was signed. Bangladesh was a very different country 30 years ago. And we followed the same treaty for 30 years. It should have been adjusted depending on the need, how the needs change. Indus Water Treaty, I've been saying for a long time, has been obsolete. It's been hindering development in India and Pakistan. But until some crisis occurs, there was no attempt to revise the treaty or no attempt by any scholar to see how the Indus Water Treaty or any treaty could be written which should have a clause somewhere that it has to be revised continually, every 5 years, 10 years, etc. And India has a special problem because of interstate rivers. Emadul mentioned the Tista one. Yes, of course. The central government wanted to go with the Tista Treaty, but the Chief Minister of West Bengal said no. And in India, water is a state subject. The state center cannot force Indian provinces, to follow what it wants. And the other problem in India, we have interstate river dispute. I have said it quite clearly now that Interstate River Dispute Act was written in 1956. Okay, 1956. We are now in 2026. It has never been changed, and it is not surprisingly has been completely obsolete for a very long time. What is happening now? The two states in India fight over a river as if like two different countries. Any river, both wanting more water, which the river does not have, and they don't understand. And the major problem in India, Bangladesh, Pakistan is the time horizon for planning is no more than 4 years. The politicians come into power for a 4-year period, and once they get in, they have a very short period, and the water problems cannot be solved within a 4-year time slot. It needs 20, 30 years of planning and consistent planning and funding so that the problems are solved. So I don't see, irrespective of all the good expertise India, Bangladesh, Pakistan has, unfortunately, I don't see a bright future of any other countries, of any of these 3 countries, because of water scarcity. On top of that, all these 3 countries are now in gung-ho on creating data centers, creating chip factories, which all need not only enormous amount of water, but most people do not realize in order to manufacture chips. We need water that is of a much better quality than drinking water, and which we've been polluting left, right, and center. All our rivers are polluted, groundwater is polluted, and yet the politicians think we have to follow the West. And one of the main problem I think India, Bangladesh, Pakistan has, we are following the Western modes and Western patterns to manage water. The Dutch and the Danes and the Norwegians and the Swedes made integrated water resources management a UN SDG, okay? And nobody asked anyone in India. India said that we should have a IWRM plans for the provinces. Nobody asked once, is IWRM applicable in India? The Dutch, all these Western small countries, they have not been able to do it in their countries, IWRM. But they're pushing IWRM because it creates job for their consultants. They sell equipment, they sell education, and create a clientele in India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, who say IWRM is the nirvana. So what we have to do in India is to decide what is appropriate for us. In 2000, China decided that Chinese solutions, including water, must follow Chinese characteristics, okay? And they spent enormous amount of money doing research to find solution with Chinese characteristics. So they came out with, they call the river chief system. It will not work in India unless we manage it. It is the most disintegrated water resources management you can think of. Each river chief, who is the political chief of the province or the town or the municipality, is responsible for only that small part of river. He or she doesn't care what happens upstream or downstream. And you are evaluated. If you are mayor of Shanghai, the party's disciplinary committee evaluates how you kept your portion of water safe. If you can't keep it safe, you're out, you're history. Okay? So the river chief system has completely revolutionized China's water management. They have completely eliminated the class 4, class 5 water completely. Class 3 water, which is medium pollution, they're about to finish it off in the next 5-year plan. And they're making remarkable progress by developing their own solutions, which works under their own conditions, under their political and climatic conditions. And India has to do the same. Look at India's national water policy. And I know, Anamika, you were part of the last division of this, which never went through. From 1980 on, the national water policy says we should have river basin organization from last 40 years. How many river basin organizations have been created in India? 0. Are one of them are they being discussed? No. Just because the West thinks this is the way to go, we have followed the Western tradition. And the West does not have the Indian monsoon conditions. So the question is, how do we start water management, not only in Brahmaputra, but other parts of the world, other parts of India, under Indian monsoon conditions, when all the rain falls in 4 to 5 months, and the rest of the year we don't have anything. In London, in England, every month we have rainfall. Delhi has more rainfall than London, but the highest soil moisture in London is lower than the lowest soil moisture. No, highest soil moisture in Delhi is lower than the lowest soil moisture in UK. So we have to start thinking about how do we develop our water management to fit our Indian conditions. And we talked a lot about the data in Brahmaputra. I'm sorry, you are not going to get any data because much of the data in Brahmaputra is not with the Indian Ministry of Water Resources, the Ministry of Defense. Okay, water flow, many of these are Ministry of Defense. Same goes in China, the People's Liberation Army, because of the sensitivity, they have all the data. In the Ministry of Water Resources, China do not have access to the data. Neither has the Ministry of Water Resources in India. Okay, so it will be very difficult to get data. We can talk about saying data compatibility, but the fact is, by Indian regulations, data on transboundary rivers are state secrets. So they are not going to put it so that everybody has access to it. So those are the real problems. Instead of saying data is a problem, in fact, these days data are not a problem. Someone mentioned about looking at what is happening in the different parts of the Brahmaputra basin. Well, at least India and China, they have their own remote sensing, the satellites. They can get good picture of what is happening in Brahmaputra basin in China, and Chinese can do the same. And in Bangladesh, I don't know about the satellite system, but if they don't have, you have access to NASA and all those photographs, or you can get and see what is actually happening, and you can't hide it anymore. So we need to start thinking about real issues, real problems. And the other thing, we talk about collaboration. It is not easy. It's not easy because when the Chinese said they're going to build a major hydropower dam in the Brahmaputra band, many major Indian media said they will, that becomes a weapon. Well, the fact is only 16% of Brahmaputra water comes from China. Even by a miracle, Chinese managed to store all that water. It won't make any difference to India because it is the other 84%. And no country can hold all the water. So instead of saying what other people are going wrong, we need to think about what we need to do in the Brahmaputra basin. India is very late to develop Brahmaputra river and its tributaries. Very late. China has gone gung-ho. I've been advising the Chinese government since 1980, when Deng Xiaoping asked me to come and review the south to north water transfer scheme. I've been advising them since then continuously. And believe me, one of the major advantages is long-term planning. They don't have to worry about 4-year election cycle. And all the water minister, vice minister, etc., they're all technocrats. They have been technocrats. They know what are the problems, they know what are the solutions, and they are the brightest some of the brightest you can find. So once they made the plan in 1980 on the water transfer, they spent around at least $100 billion, and the funding was coming regular. There's no problem. So we need some way to do that. And one of the problem we have, at least in India, the average stay of a water utility manager, say Delhi Jal Board or Chennai Jal Board or Bangalore Water Supply, average stay is 14 to 18 months. They're very bright people, but they know they're inheriting a very complex problem. They know they're not going to be there, and nothing much happens. So we are not making much progress not significant progress in the water area. So we need to start looking at how we can reimagine water management, agricultural water management, industrial water management, domestic water use. They're all in bad shape. Nobody, for example, if I ask an Indian utility how much water a human being needs to lead a happy, lead a healthy and productive life, it's about 75 liters. But why do we need 125 to 130 liters in other parts, in many parts of the country, and 40 to 50% leakage from the system? So we have problems everywhere in the water management. And my view is, unless these problems are done, not only Brahmaputra, but India's water and energy problems cannot be solved. And it is through discussions like this, we have to look at what are the broader issues involved and how we can do that. Yes, we can solve the problem, but getting the political support is very difficult. And even if I get political support, the next minister that comes, at one time, one Indian water minister lasted all of one day. Okay, so the question is, how do we get continuity in our politicians? The secretaries, joint secretaries, they leave within 2 years. Okay, 2 to 3 years maximum. We need people who have knowledge of water, committed to the water, and can influence water for a long time. That is not happening. And unless that happens, I don't see much good future, not only in Brahmaputra, but also the rest of India. We might say, we might publish a lot of papers, but with this type of institutional arrangements, we have a problem. So these are some of my thoughts. India's water, to sum up, India's water problems are solvable. Brahmaputra water problems could be solved. Brahmaputra has a tremendous source of water and energy. India lacks both. So instead of looking how to develop good dams, construct them quickly, we are, at least from what I see in India, all the water infrastructure constructions are being delayed. Delayed because of poor planning, poor management. NHPC says that because of a lot of institutional problems, the cost and the time of all the dams they build have been significantly overdone. And yet, we are not using, in India, as far as I know, no one is using, no water department, no water ministry, the state or the federal level, central level is using digitalization, sensors, artificial intelligence, and big data analytics to construct dams. I've been advising China. The last visit I made was 4 months ago. They invited me to attend the opening of the world's largest dam at 314 meters high, highest dam, which they constructed in 6 years, okay, by using extensively artificial intelligence and digitalization. India has that expertise, but we are still using old way of doing things, and there is, my view is, status quo mostly wins over major revolutionary approaches. So unless we do this type of developments, which India has the expertise, change some of the institutional arrangements, I'm afraid India's water future does not look very bright. And that is my personal opinion. I've shared it with the current Prime Minister. He knows what I think. I've been asked to help Niti Aayog. Let us see to what extent the institutions will allow us to make some major radical changes in water management. I'm not very optimistic that it will happen or happen very quickly. So let us see what happens. So that finally, I think you mentioned, Dr. Das, you are planning a meeting on Brahmaputra in Hayai Indian International Center in Delhi. I'd strongly encourage you to do that and invite all the top brasses from Delhi. Use your personal influence to bring them to listen to this dialogue and see what can be done, what is not being done, and how India is losing not only money, employment, everything compared to many other countries of the world. So the future is bright, but we have to make some breakthroughs. And unfortunately, unless some catalysts like you make some changes within the government or force the government to make some changes, I don't see much will happen because we are going on an incremental path for the last century. That's all from my side.
Thank you, Dr. Biswas. I would now like to move on to our concluding session. For our concluding remarks, we are honored to have Ambassador Jaideep Majumdar, former Secretary East in India's Ministry of External Affairs. With an extensive diplomatic career across Asia, Europe, and the United Nations system. Glad to have you with us, sir.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here, delighted to be in the company of such experts in diverse fields and very eminent persons. Thank you, Dr. Das, for getting us all together. It has been a good learning experience for me. When we talk about underwater domain awareness, my experience so far has been more in the maritime sphere because as diplomats from India, we cooperate with assisting other countries in maritime domain awareness. So underwater domain awareness in terms of rivers is something that is new to me. And I must say, Tejaswini, you've made a very compelling case for why we need this, and it is so important for a river like the Brahmaputra. So I had some prepared comments, but given the breadth of discussion and the depth of discussion that we have had, so I will kind of work through it depending on what has been said so far. So, and I won't take too much of your time. It appears to me that there are basically two different aspects that we are looking at. One is the importance of underwater domain awareness. And on that, I think there can be no doubt that use of surface river training techniques has not really worked, or if it has worked in a very haphazard and for the short term. And in the longer term, we have to employ these technologies in a much, much wider framework in order to both utilize our water resources as well as prevent the kind of catastrophes that we have had. Now, like at least two of the panelists, Anamika as well as Imadul, I also grew up on the banks of the Brahmaputra. So it is a river that is also close to my heart. Luit, or Bura Luit as we call him. And there is a reason for that, not only because the name itself is masculine, Brahmaputra, but also because he is a very virile, active, strong, river that carries all in its path. And therefore, these kind of studies are very, very important for such a river. And perhaps that is the reason why, as Professor Biswas says, we have not been able to utilize the waters of the Brahmaputra to the extent that we should, because it is so untamable. But as a result of that, of course, the river is part of Assam's folklore. It is being made immortalized by Dr. Bhupen Hazarika's songs on the river, by folk songs and festivals and things like that. So it is really the lifeline of Assam. And perhaps you could call it the central character in the state's cultural identity. So from all points of view, of course, this river, whether it is social, cultural, or economic, is a very important actor in the state of Assam, and in fact for the entire Northeast. Now, the other aspect, of course, is the governance aspect, and where in terms of transboundary governance and information sharing on such a river. The challenge for India, of course, is that it is both the lower riparian and the upper riparian for the Brahmaputra River. It's in a unique position. And therefore, one has to look at the totality of the picture as the river enters India and it exits into Bangladesh. Now, like Ambassador Karim, not like Ambassador Karim, in fact, Ambassador Karim is one who is a diplomat who has perhaps had the largest experience with subcontinental river issues and discussions on rivers. But I have myself been involved in river water discussions with China, specifically on the expert level mechanism, the ELM that we had actually with China on the Sutlej and the Brahmaputra. Unfortunately, both these understandings have lapsed on the Sutlej in 2020 and in the Brahmaputra in 2023. And I must say, and this is to corroborate what others have said, that discussions regarding even basic parameters of river water flows is a very fraught subject, which I found out to my cost in my discussions with China on the Sutlej. And it is both because of lack of transparency as well as a kind of antagonism regarding sharing of river water data, which makes it very difficult to make even incremental progress. So what happens is that when an MOU is signed between two countries, it tends to get frozen. And what Professor Biswas mentioned about the need to regularly revise water sharing treaties or information sharing treaties is very relevant, because once that agreement or understanding gets frozen, even getting the information under that becomes problematic, let alone adding newer parameters or enlarging the scope or, heaven forbid, revising that treaty or MOU. So, as you all know, in the case of China, the importance of sharing of information on the parameters of flow of the Brahmaputra takes on a added importance for India because of the massive dam that is being constructed on the Brahmaputra before it enters India. And this would be a project that is at least 3 times the size of the Three Gorges project. And it is not merely the retention of water that is a problem. It is possible diversion of water from that basin to other basins, which the Chinese on several occasions have stated as the long-term objective. And also the impact it will have on the lean season flows, which would be quite devastating for the state of Assam as well as for Bangladesh. So unfortunately, we have had no exchange of information on this subject. even on the parameters of flow of Brahmaputra waters. The last meeting was held in New Delhi in 2023. And since then, of course, relations have been testy between the two countries. And with the prospects of improvement in relations, there have been discussions on revival of those mechanisms, of all mechanisms, in fact, that have been in abeyance or have not or have expired. So we hope, and this is quite critical for us, and therefore we hope we are in talks with the Chinese on reviving that mechanism of river water talks. With Bangladesh, of course, on the Brahmaputra, we do share data through the River Waters Commission. But I think not only on the Brahmaputra, but also other rivers which flow from Assam into Bangladesh, or from India into Bangladesh, it would be very important, not only in the case of, say, Bangladesh, but also in the case of Nepal, to share, data, underwater domain awareness, because often what happens is local issues become highly politicized, and it is only if information sharing, not only information sharing, but also a common understanding of the parameters or of the information and the data that is being mapped, especially underwater data, will help to mitigate some of these tensions, which often take on a very virulently political character. So that is one aspect that I thought I would flag. So UDI does offer a pathway to strengthen our transboundary trust. Data that is jointly generated and scientifically verifiable would help to reduce uncertainties and misperceptions among riparian nations, and shared monitoring platforms and collaborative modeling can shift regional engagement from reactive crisis, as several speakers mentioned, to a proactive evidence-based coordination. And in this sense, this webinar could, result in creating greater awareness and perhaps taking steps forward to engage with governments on how these technologies can assist both within their own countries, as well as in creating greater transboundary trust regarding the water flows. So I will stop here, because there has been a lot of very important points that have been made, and I don't want to repeat those again. But I would say that I did really benefit from this exercise, and I would like to compliment each and every one of you for having been such enlightening speakers on this panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you so much for your concluding remarks, summarizing all the key points, takeaway points from today. I'd like to now invite Dr. Commander Arnab Das, Director and Founder of Maritime Research Center and Neerdhani Technologies, for his remarks.
Thank you, Catherine. First of all, thank you, panelists, and concluding remarks by Ambassador Majumdar, sir. Sir, I am also from Assam, so although I have not stayed there, so I definitely share the emotions with all of you. And that's been our effort to kind of stitch together. I mean, each and every comment I have added significant value to our understanding on the subject. And starting from Ambassador Karim, I definitely would like to put forward that, yes, there are difficulties, yes, there are barriers, but let us do what we can. I mean, that's what Sir has, and he's been a optimist throughout. And Sir, we definitely share your views, and we have, that's what we are trying to do, create a body of work and trying to push things. Anamika mentioned about the importance of, I mean, that's what I think we definitely aligned with what you said. I mean, the people factor is very, very important. I mean, and I would also like to submit that UDA is not
Sure.
about technology alone. It is about, yes, Ambassador Karim, say you wanted to say something.
Yeah, just one quick, because I'll probably lose you in
Sure, sir. Please go
20,
ahead, sir.
30 seconds.
Sir,
Two
sir.
quick points. Number one, I think I do, treating the river hydrologically is one of the ways, but it is more than hydrological. Our rivers have become politicized, and it has to be approached. And that was one of the things which enabled us actually to arrive at a solution for the Ganges at that time. Now it's becoming politicized again. I don't know where they will go. So that's one point to keep in mind. Number two, I made a suggestion about what Isimod had done, perhaps with the Opri Sasakawa Peace Foundation being part of this webinar. Perhaps they could convene a similar sort of, or this webinar can become the core of a similar dialogue being reinstituted, particularly as there are some signs of India and China reaching out or talking to each other in some areas. And let's not forget that SARC failed because of India-Pakistan problem. Brahmaputra is stuck again because of India-China problems. 58% of the basin is India, 28% is China. So, and I'll pass on some other points because I just have to leave now. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much, sir. Yes. So, continuing, sir, what Professor Anamika said, definitely I align with what you mentioned.
65. Oh.
I mean, UDA is in the process and it will continue to remain in the process. But institutionally, we value the people side of it as much as anything else. And I mean, that's very much the reason why Tejaswini is driving this initiative. And she is being assisted by a lot of my technical research fellows who are contributing in their own way of handling some of the aspects. Dr. Imadul brought out this very important aspect of capacity. And the awareness. So you'll be happy to know underwater domain awareness as a skilling program has been approved by Maharashtra Skill University, and it covers freshwater management also as one of the verticals. And it is going to be integrated. I mean, you will have a tech student along with a liberal arts student sitting in the same class and learning. The differentiation will be mainly in their project. And of course, there will be certain subjects, but they will be sitting together and working in a course curriculum, I think, which is I feel a very, very important thing. And as you see the UDA framework, policy intervention, technology intervention, and capacity and capability building, even at the diplomatic level or at the bureaucratic level, or even other stakeholders. MRC does get an opportunity to interact with diplomats in their induction course. We recently had a 5-day program for the Indian Forest Service officers also. They spent 5 days with us. So we try and inject these thoughts and ideas, and most of the time we get very, very positive response from them. But I think the barriers that have got created over a period of time will take a while. And Asit sir has articulated the reality of the situation very, very well, sir. I was also part of, me and Catherine have been part of one of the committees, and we do echo what you said. But, sir, I mean, broadly, the strategic intention is there. And we did try and put things in writing, and we hope that we will be able to contribute and make a change. From our side, we will continue to push. And uh, as I also want to mention that UDA has so many dimensions. I mean, you brought out this aspect of over dependence on the West. We've been, I started off by talking about the tropical waters, and does the West understand the tropical waters? Is a very simple question. And I mean, you have elaborated it much better, so let me not repeat that part. So indigenous effort, and particularly, sir, this part of the world, has got such a rich civilization legacy. So there's a lot of information that is there, a lot of traditional knowledge and practice which is there. But how to integrate into the larger policy framework is also one of the key focuses that we are trying to put forward. So I think I will stop here, and I would like to thank each one of you. Jaideep sir, I'll continue to engage with you, and we'll also be coming out with a report which we will share with each one of you before it is put out in the public domain. And we will continue to engage with all of you, and we really feel privileged and honored that you could spare your very valuable time and join this. And we assure you that we will continue on this path and keep you informed. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much, sir.
Well done, Catherine and Tejaswini. Very well presented. Thank you so much. Shreya, Ayush, everybody at the back end, you did a great job. Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. We'll close it for now.
Thank you.